Welcome back, guys. It's craft time. In today's video, we're going to be doing some paper flowers. We're going to be doing a bouquet and an assortment of different types of flowers. Let's get started. Starting with our materials, you're just going to need an assortment of different types of paper. I have some regular paper and also some cardstock. I'm going to be using regular scissors, which is really all you need, pipe cleaners, and then I have some extra like fun cutting scissors if you happen to have any of those on hand. And I'm also going to show you how to use some punch tools if you also happen to have some of those. You'll need a ruler, and then I also have a straight edge that I'm going to be using, a pencil, and then some type of glue. I prefer hot glue. I do have Elmer's glue here, but a glue stick would probably work better. Again, I'm going to be using my straight edge just to make things go a little faster for myself, but it is not necessary. For the first flower, the first thing you want to do for each flower is to decide how big you want it or how long you want your petals. What you're going to do is just decide what that number is. On my first one, I'm going to do 2 inches. I'm just going to mark it with my ruler, and then I'm going to cut a strip of that paper out. After that, you're going to want to decide how wide you want your petals. Now, you make petals in different ways, but this is still what you want to do when you're using strips of paper like this. So I've decided that I'm going to go with about 1 centimeter on each width of my petals. So I'm just going to mark that on my piece of paper and just leave myself a small little line. Now you can go across and mark a line across the entire thing if you're needing that visual, but I'm just going to go ahead and make tick marks all the way down across this piece of paper. The next step is to fold the paper. So we're going to be doing a folding in like an accordion style to where we fold it over one way, flip the paper, and fold it back the other way. That way it kind of scrunches it up. You're gonna want to try to keep this as symmetrical and even as possible, and that's where those little lines come in. As you can see here, I'm just folding it back and forth and kind of using the ones that I've folded prior to keep me as a guide. And I'm also using my thumbnail on the pencil mark that I've already made to kind of help crease it to make sure that I'm folding it in the right spot. You're just going to do this all the way down the paper, and then at the end you want to squeeze it and kind of push on those creases the best that you can to make sure that they're nice and folded. This is going to give you 1/2 of your flower petals. So you want to do the exact same thing with the same measurements on a second piece, and then we will be able to put them together to create the full flower. Now, I originally tried just using my Elmer's glue. I don't have a small bottle, so I just painted some on, and it just didn't work. I'm not patient enough to let it dry. A glue stick would probably go a lot faster, but I am a huge fan of hot glue, so that is what I'm going to be turning to for all of my flowers here. Again, if you don't have that, a glue stick would be best. You just want to line up the 2 ends. On this paper, it doesn't matter, but if you have a paper with a design or a certain texture on one side, just make sure that that textured or designed side is facing the same way, as in up, so that you can see it. And then just glue your ends together. Then, after that's dry and adhered very well, you want to attach the other ends as well. It's not going to lay flat for you just yet, but you can kind of push it down to kind of get an idea of what it will look like, because we're going to need to add a little back to it to give it some support. I'm going to be using this yellow piece of paper to create a center for my flower. Now, originally I did the exact same steps as I did for the pink flower petals, but then I rolled it up to create a center for the flower. I did not end up liking this, but it was the exact same steps. I just made it shorter. I did, I think, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch tall, and then I made my marks and I folded it in the accordion style, and then I just rolled it up instead of just gluing the ends together. Then I took my circle hole punch, which you can just cut a circle if you don't have one. It just saves me a little time. I'm putting some glue down on it. I'm adding my pipe cleaner to it, and then I'm going to put my pink flower petals right on top. Now what this is going to do is 1, attach the stem, but 2, it's going to hold the flower petals in place. That way it's not crinkling up on you or like flaring up, and it's going to lay nice and flat. You just want to hold it there until it's nice and dry and adhered, and then we can move on to adding a center. I rolled this up and I went ahead and added some hot glue to adhere it to the flower. However, I did not like the way that this looked at all. So I took it off and I started again, and I just took my yellow circle hole punch. Again, you don't have to have a hole punch or a punch thing at all. You can just use scissors, just draw a circle, cut it out. You can print out circles. You can use your Cricut to cut shapes for you if you have a Cricut. But this is just what I had on hand. After I cut out the hole, I just folded it. I folded it in half, and then I folded it in half again, so down into fourths. And then I took my scissors and I cut 3/4 of the way down to where the crease is. And I cut the crease in the other, like when you unfold it, there are going to be some spots that you miss. Just cut those parts down too. And all I'm doing is making like the little pollen stems. And then I'm going to glue this down onto my flower once it's ready. And I don't like it when the little like frays that I just cut lie flat, so I am going to use my fingers and kind of lift them up and move them around just a little bit. Once you've adjusted it to the way that you like, that's it. Flower number 1 is complete. This is the easiest flower I think I'm going to show you, but it's also not my favorite. So the next flower that we're going to do, flower number 2, is this exact same flower, but we're going to give it some shape. So we're going to shape the petals a little bit. So it's pretty much the same steps, but we're just going to alter it slightly. So for this one, I'm using this pretty teal paper. I've done the exact same thing. I've measured out how tall I want the petals to be, and then how wide I want my petals to be. And now I'm just taking scissors, which I tried to cut the whole thing at once. That didn't work. This is cardstock. So I'm just taking it and I'm cutting off those hard corners. Now you can do this in a straight line. You can kind of round it. The shaping is kind of up to you. But you just want to do this just on one end and just cut off both sides of the corners. And that is going to give you a pretty petal shape once you open it up. So you can see I did one side and now I've flipped it over and I'm doing the second side. I'm kind of making them, trying to make them as similar as possible, but every petal is different. So don't be, upset if it doesn't, you didn't get that exact cut on any of them. You can see I fanned it out, it looks very pretty, and then I did that on a second strip as well because you need 2. That way you can form your full flower. I glued one in together, and then with this one, it was shiny on one side and not the other, so I did have to pay attention to make sure I glued it together properly. I'm going to glue the other ends together. And then I also decided that for this one, I wanted to do 2 layers. I have this really fun marbled multicolored paper that has some blues and pinks and yellows and stuff in it that I thought would match really well. So I just did the exact same thing as before, but I cut it shorter than I did my blue petals. That way when it fits on, you can still see the blue petals in the background. As I'm going through, originally I did not want to cut it like I did the other petals in the back, but I did change my mind and you'll see that here in a bit. So here you see me cutting out another circle. This is for the back for my teal piece, and I'm going to be adding a stem. This flower is bigger than the pink one, and I just think that it needs a little bit more support. So you see me kind of winding up my pipe cleaner. This is just going to make sure that it's nice and adhered and make it just a bit more substantial to hold the back of the flower. So I'm just putting down my hot glue. I'm going to put that down, and then I'm going to put hot glue on top of the pipe cleaner again just to make sure that there's plenty of glue to actually adhere the flower as well. So just like we did in flower 1, we're going to flatten the flower and then put it on top and hold it there until the glue has dried. And flattening the flower is not always as easy as it seems, so fumble around, it's okay. You see me struggling a bit too. Now I'm just putting my second layer right on top just to kind of get a visual of how I want it to be. And this is where I realized I think I do want to shape the petals to make it match and flow a little better. And even though I've already glued it together, I can still accomplish this. So what I'm doing is I've picked the side that I want to go ahead and cut. I'm just scrunching those sections together, and then I am cutting off the corner of one side of it. And after I've done all of the corners on that side, I'm going to flip it inside out. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm on the side that I've already previously cut. That way I'm not accidentally cutting both ends of it. So just make sure that the side that you're about to cut, the corner of that is also cut. Sorry, I'm not really sure how to word that to make it make sense, so hopefully you understand me. So you just go around, cut all of that off, and then you'll have your fun petal shapes for this as well. And as I unfold it here, you'll see that now it matches this flower a little bit better. Before, visually, I wasn't fully set that that was how it needed to be. So I'm going to do the exact same thing as I have before. I'm going to cut out a circle for the background, and I'm going to apply it to the smaller petals. That way it will adhere to the flower a little bit better, have a better surface for it to grip to, and also help keep it in place. So once I've adhered it to my circle, I'm just going to add more glue, and then I'm going to place it where I think it looks best in the center of the teal flower. Now I will say when I added my hot glue to this, it reheated the glue to the front of the flower. And it started to kind of come apart a little bit because it had to re-cool down so that it would stick. So if you're doing this, just hold it a little bit longer than you would because you probably reheated your glue and it's going to try to move around on you. Now for the center of this flower, I wanted it to be not really the focal point, so I wanted it to be pretty small. So all I did was cut out a very small strip of this pretty blue that I was using. I cut it in half so that I would have two sections. And I cut down about 3/4 of the way and in very, very skinny fine strips, as many that would fit on that piece of paper. And I did that for both pieces. Then to attach them, I used a little bit of hot glue and I put them kind of crossing over each other, perpendicular, like in an X shape. And I glued them together. And then I added some hot glue to the bottom of them and I just slid them straight down into the hole into the middle of the flower. And I rearranged them and kind of like spread them out to where they're not just not just straight and stiff. And I think it turned out very cute. So here you can see the two flowers side by side, and I think we can all agree that the second one with the detailed petals is much better. Now moving back again, we're going to be using the circle punch, so you can again just cut out some circles of your own. They don't have to be perfect circles. If you think of a flower, they're not perfectly symmetrical. You don't really see perfect circles or anything on them, so don't be stressed out if you have a little bit of a differing shape just from where you're cutting it out. Now I did these petals for this flower and the next one. And in the next one, I show you a better way to fold these and prep them. But for now, I am just folding over the flaps kind of in like a small V. And I'm doing that on each petal because that flap is going to be how we connect the petals together. Now, the reason I did it differently in the next one is just because it made it a little more uniform. That way, those overlapping flaps, like where I'm gluing it, were the same size and just made it a little cleaner and less messy when I was applying the glue. For this flower, I did 7 petals, and then I just took my glue. You can only see 6 here, I add 1. I think odd numbers end up being a little bit better. So I just take a little bit of glue, I put it on that flap, and then I connect it together. And I'm going to do this all the way around on these petals. And then you'll see that whenever I add my 7th one in, because there's going to be a gap. So once I added the 7th one on there, you can see it kind of made it wavy and gave it some really pretty natural movement. And then I needed to fold the centers. So I just went around and kind of pinched it together and it kind of folded where it needed to. And I put a crease in the middle of all of those just to give it a little extra texture and make it the movement feel a little better. And then as you can see, it has a really big center on this one, and I thought that was perfect for the center I made for the original flower. So I just scrunched it together a little bit tighter than I had it before, and then I put it into the center of this flower. To do this, I just cut out another circle of the same color petal, because you can see through it just a little bit. And then I glued the center and the flower to that circle. After that, we still need a stem, so I took an additional circle. I took my stem, I did bend it up just a little bit so that we could get a little bit more surface of the stem onto the circle. I hot glued it, and I hot glued it onto the back just like I have done in flowers 1 and 2. I think this one is super cute and delicate, and I really like it a lot. And the next flower, we're going to be doing something similar, but we're going to be making a completely different flower. So for this dark purple flower, I cut out, I believe, 11 circles. Again, I told you, I think the odd numbers look a little bit better. So what I've done this time is I am folding the circle in half. So fold it like a taco. And then from there, the flaps, you can fold them down. I apologize, I'm about to go off screen just a little bit, but you're gonna fold them backwards. So your creases are gonna go in opposite directions. So I folded a taco, and then I fold that flap backwards to where it meets the crease. So you see how it's lined up even with the crease? So like the spine of the taco. We're gonna do that, and then you're gonna fold the other one to match. And that's gonna make it a lot more symmetrical. And then having that crease already in there just saves you a step later. It's a little bit easier to manage. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start gluing these together. Just like I did in the previous flower. I'm going to glue. But then whenever I get around to where in the last one we connected it to create the full petals, you're just going to keep adding them. The rotation of the circles and how they kind of glue together is just going to keep winding those petals up, and it's going to give you more of a 3D flower. It's just really delicate and very pretty. So you just keep going, and you can do this kind of however many times you want, but it kind of comes to like a natural stop. So I just kind of went to what looked good to my eye, because you want the bottom of your flower to be bigger and then kind of come up to, not a point, but like a mound, kind of like you want the bottom to be bigger than the top. Once I got the flower to the step that I wanted, I took the last petal that was on top, and I hot glued it and secured it. And then I also took the last petal that was on the bottom, that the very first one we started with, and I hot glued that one down as well. That way it's not just one string, and it's more formed, and it's not just going to unravel on you. And then I also took a little bit of hot glue and put it underneath the first and second layer just to kind of attach them. I did it in there really deep so that it's not messing with the petals at all, just to make sure that it's going to stay together nice and pretty and the shape that I want it to. And then for this pipe cleaner, I'm going to stick it through, and then I bent the top. That way it won't just pull down through, but also to kind of hide the wire that you can see at the top of pipe cleaners. And then I'm going to flip it over to the back, and I'm going to put a ring of hot glue around the stem where it meets the petals, just to ensure that it's not going to accidentally come out at any point. I really love this flower. I think it's super delicate. I love how 3D effect it is. So I hope that you guys like this one too. The next flower, I'm going to be using a heart punch that I have. I'm just, again, trying to show you that if you have any of these punch tools at home, that you can utilize them for these. For this first one, I just punched out a bunch of hearts, and then I folded them in half and glued them together just by using the half of the heart. And it just turned out into like a little like a bud, like a flower bud that hasn't quite bloomed. But looking back at this video, I think it would look really pretty if I would have cut out some long white petals and turned it into a daisy. To adhere the stem to this one, because it is a particular shape, I just cut out another heart, and I'm using it just like I did the circle backings and all of the other flowers, but this one's a shape that matches it. That way you don't see any extra material hanging up anywhere. But I just thought this was a cute little bloom that kind of can stick out of the bouquet that we're going to be making, and just give it some texture. On the next flower that we're doing with the heart punched, I cut out quite a bit. I don't remember exactly how many hearts I did. I just did it until I thought it looked good. I'm just folding down the tops of the hearts, so almost making it look like they have ears. I'm folding those over. I'm using a circle punch out that I did, and I'm gluing them into a circle. Now, if they're overlapping a little bit, that's okay. So I just did it until it was full, and then I did it again. So I did another circle. I laid them down until it was full, and then I ended up cutting out a couple more, and I did it one more time. And then I do happen to have a smaller heart, so I went ahead and did a couple of those as well, doing this same exact technique, and then I put those in the center just to kind of scale down the petals from the middle. I added on my stem the same as the others, and I think it's a really cute pop of yellow for this flower. For the next flower, we're doing the exact same paper strip as in 1 and 2. We're measuring how tall we want our petals, we're measuring how wide we want our petals, but instead of folding it, we're going to be cutting it. So on your guidelines, you cut it down about 3/4 because you don't want to cut all the way through. And then you're going to come back and you're just going to cut each individual, either rounded or kind of straight, however you decide the shape you want for your petal, and you're going to cut those shapes out. Then I went ahead and pre-rolled this one, and then I'm doing a second set of this as well in a different color because I want it to be a multi-toned flower. So it's same as before. I cut it to the same length as the light yellow because I want it to be the same length, but this time I did my petals a little skinnier, and then I found a little bit of a quicker way to cut it. So I found that if I cut all of the petals in one direction first, then flip it over, I can do the other side instead of switching my hand back and forth. It just saved me a little bit of time. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to pre-roll it as well. This is just so I don't have to fight the paper as much, so when I have them both stacked. Then I just laid the one on top of the other, put some glue on my stem, and started rolling it up. Now I'm rolling it up not super tight, but pretty tight. That way it stays nice and attached to the stem. And I'm just going to slowly go. So I have two different size petals here, so it is just trying to make sure that I'm not crinkling one too much or just being very delicate with it. And then as you roll, you're going to want to add a little bit of glue as you go. That way, if you do need a little break on your fingers, you can let go, or just, if your fingers slip or something, it's not just going to unroll on you. And it'll just help it be more secure in the end as well. So then when you get to the very end, make sure that you glue it as well, and then you can start pulling your flower apart. Now you want to be very delicate because your petals on this will be pretty small, and you're just going to slowly start pulling it apart and adjusting the petals. You can manipulate them a little bit, but you don't want to tear them, so just be gentle and kind of move them around until you get kind of the shape that you want. I wanted to make a few small white flowers, so this is just computer paper. Like I said, you can use regular paper or cardstock. Both work. The cardstock might withstand a little bit more, but I thought the computer paper would do really well for showing small, delicate flowers. So I'm doing these fun scissors that I happen to have on hand. I'm just cutting a straight line with how tall I want my petals to be, and in between each place where it kind of dips down, I'm cutting 3/4 of the way. I'm doing the same thing as the last flower. I'm going to glue it to my stem and slowly roll it up, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of glue each time. And it doesn't matter if you have the same type of scissors as me. Anywhere where you see it dip down, that's where you're going to want to cut it, and that's going to give it kind of the natural petals that would kind of form. So just roll it up pretty delicately, and then the same as the last one, you're going to very slowly start manipulating it and moving the petals out to where you want them to be. I love this little flower. I think it's super cute, and I like the different texture of the petals because the scissors, when I was cutting it based on the scissors, not on what I wanted for the petals. So it gave it a lot of definition and some different sizes, and I think it turned out really cute. The next flower we're going to be doing is a rose. Now for this, you can use a pencil and draw out a pattern, or you can just be like me and go for it. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking my scissors and I am swivel cutting it all the way across, but kind of as a diagonal, because I'm going to start smaller on one end and get a little bit bigger as I finish it out. I'm going to, you want to do this based on how big you want your rose to be. I'm going to be doing 3 panels of this because we are going to glue them together. So I'm going to take my first panel, I'm going to take the end edge where it's slightly bigger than where I started cutting, line it up, that way when I go to glue it, they match up really well. And then I'm just going to start swivel cutting again, gradually as I'm going, getting a little bit taller on the other end of the paper, line up my biggest end for my third panel and do it again. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, when we roll this, we're going to roll it from the smaller end to the bigger end. That way the bigger petals are on the outside, and that's why we're getting taller. So if you want to use a pencil and just draw it, that might work a little bit better for you if you aren't sure what I'm talking about. So basically, when I started cutting, I didn't cut the petals as tall, and I cut them taller as I went. You can see me here, I'm just finding the sides that line up together, and I'm going to glue those down. This is just going to make it one big strip, that way I can roll it all at one time and not have to worry about doing it separately. Again, where my petals would start to dip down, I'm going to be cutting the paper down about 3/4 of the way, and this is going to give me my separated petal look. And then we're going to be using our stem and we're going to roll it up. Now with the rose, you want to start rolling very tightly, and then as you go, roll a little bit looser. So I folded my pipe cleaner down and over, that way just in case any of it does show the wires not showing through. I just put it starting at the small end and start wrapping it as tight as I can. And then as I go progressively, I'm adding a little bit of glue to make sure that it's still, not going to unravel on me, but I'm getting looser as I wrap it as I get to the bigger petals. You can see here at the bottom kind of how it's not super tight, but that's what you want, because when we go to try to give the petals some shape, if they're too tight, then they won't bend back on you and they're just going to rip. So you just want to make sure it's a little bit loose, but still secure to where it's not going to fall off. So after you've glued the edge down and you have it secured on there, you're going to very carefully start peeling back that last layer of petals. Now it's not going to come easily, so just do it very carefully. You don't want to rip them, but don't worry about wrinkling the paper, because we're going to do that on purpose anyway, because it looks really pretty and delicate and more realistic if you do. So I'm just going to do the first, possibly the second to last layer, and pull those petals out, and then we're going to cut out some petals individually. So you can see the middle of the rose is tightly wrapped, just like you would see in a real rose, and then they start to kind of flare out. So what I'm going to do is just cut some more petals. I'm going to do it again to where I have some that are a little bit smaller, some that are bigger, but you want all of your petals to be bigger than the last petals on your actual rosebud. We are going to fold a small flap at the flat end of your petal, and that's going to be where you can glue it. If you're having issues with being able to bend the petal whenever you're gluing it onto your flower, you can just cut that little flap in half, and that will help the flower bend a little bit more as you're gluing it on. Before I added them on, I went ahead and kind of wrinkled the paper just to give it more of a delicate rose petal feel. And then you're just going to apply them around the base of the rosebud that you had made, and kind of move them and adjust them how you want. And you're just going to do this to what you think looks good, kind of balance it out. And then remember, the petals on the very bottom are going to be bigger as you go down. So like I said, just do that to where you think it looks good, And when you're satisfied, you have yourself a beautiful rose. And that is all of the flowers we're going to be making for this bouquet. So I'm just going to lay them out here so you can kind of see them all side by side. I really love how they turned out, and this is my first time actually ever making paper flowers, so I feel like I did decent. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Give me a like if you think I did a good job, and let me know if you're giving it a try. So the next thing I want to do is I wanted to make it like a bouquet, just like you would pick up from the grocery store, so how it's wrapped. Now, I didn't fully think through how to do this, so I'm going to walk you through my process of how I figured it out and what worked for me. So I have just plain white cardstock or scrapbook paper, and I knew I would have a lot more paper than I needed for the amount of flowers that I had, so I just folded the corners in, and then I kind of laid my flowers out to what I think I wanted them to be, just to kind of give you an idea of what your layout's going to be. And as I'm doing this, I'm twisting the pipe cleaners together. Now, I'm not twisting them super tight. I'm just twisting them enough to where they're not going to be moving around on me and falling out. But enough to where if I wanted to move a flower, I could easily grab the stem and pull up and it's going to come undone. Relatively easy to where I don't have to unravel every single stem. So you're just going to, like I said, play with it, put them all down, kind of wrap them up how you want them to go. You will have to play with this a little bit more after you do get your paper wrap around it, but this is kind of the process that I took to just get a visual of where I wanted the flowers to lay. Now, because our flowers are big and the papers, the cardstock and stuff can be heavy, obviously the pipe cleaners are flimsy and it's going to kind of make our flowers floppy. I knew that was going to be a problem going in, so my plan was to have the biggest flower on the point of the paper. So if you saw when I laid it down, I did it diagonally and I folded the left and right corner in. And my goal was to keep the biggest flower on that point of paper so that it can help support it. However, when I went to wrap it, my bouquet obviously flares out more than I want it to flare out, but it flares out more than what it needed to for me to actually be able to wrap it. So as I started to wrap it, the flowers kind of would slide up and then they would kind of just flop over because there was no support behind them. So what I ended up doing is taking another piece of the same color of whatever your wrap's going to be. I cut it in half and then I folded it in half. And then to give it a little bit more support and make sure that it was all one piece, I just hot glued it down together. And then I had like a little wonky edge where it didn't line up perfectly, I just cut that off. And then I'm going to use this kind of as an extra backing before I put my wrap on. So I'm going to keep it diagonal, like in a diamond shape. And I'm going to place that behind my biggest flower. And then once I think I have it where it needs to go, I'm going to glue that flower down. The only reason I'm going to spin it here is because you see that little like messed up part on my paper where it was pre-folded. I just didn't want that at the top just in case you could see any of it. But I'm just going to put some hot glue down, put it in a diamond shape, and then I'm going to put my biggest flower right on top. I'm trying to make sure none of my other flowers flop down into the glue because we don't want to ruin them at this point. Took a long time to get them here, so I'm just going to put it down there, secure it, and then I'm going to place the point on the paper that I'm working on now. I'm going to line it up to where it points the same exact direction as the wrap that I'm going to be putting on. You just want them to line up, that way they look, it looks a little more natural and you can't quite tell that you have two separate pieces. Now again, I'm going to go kind of wrap it, and though the support was there, I needed to get rid of the edges on the top piece where my flowers were glued to because they were sticking out too far and not allowing me to wrap properly. So I just cut them off. My suggestion would just do this first. So whenever you have your diamond, cut a straight line up as you see me doing here to cut off the left and the right points of it. Then it'll line up a lot better and it'll kind of slide down into the wrap that you had. Now this is, you guys, this is going to take some finagling. You're just going to have to figure out what works for you. This is what worked for me. And like I said, I didn't completely think it through, but it ended up working and it's super cute. So I think it's worth the effort. So I just glued it down. That way I knew it wouldn't be sliding around and it would become one piece. After that, I was able to wrap my flowers up. I just took it slow, kind of moved it around to where I thought it looked good. And then I glued it shut to make it, into a cone just by using a bead of my hot glue around the edges and holding it there until it was fully dry. Now, after this point, you're going to need to kind of rearrange your flowers. Now, the good thing is the pipe cleaners are just wire, so you can bend them to your mercy. So wherever you want the flower to go, you can kind of just bend the pipe cleaner and make that happen. So you see I kind of stuffed that yellow flower down into the front. I just kind of move things around. I just bend them, and if I want it to kind of stay in place, I just kink it and make a good crease. You can see me doing that there. And it's going to keep that flower from sticking out and moving around anywhere. So just move them around, and then if you get them in the spot that you want them, but they're also just too heavy or not staying, you can just use a little hot glue and hot glue them in place once you know that's where you want it to go. After that, you're going to have yourself a beautiful bouquet that just needs a piece of ribbon. So I just chose some ribbon that I have on hand, and I'm going to wrap it around and tie a little bow around my wrap. Now, you know that this is a cone, so you can't just tie it there. You need to hot glue the ribbon down, or else it will just slide off the bottom. So you're just going to do this as if you were tying your shoe. So just glue it down and then just make your little bunny ears. Cut your ribbon tails to where they're the same length. You can add a little flair to it. But you guys, I think this turned out super cute. It'd be perfect for Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or any other little special occasion. If you're like me and you're not the biggest fan of fresh cut flowers, I mean, yes, they're beautiful, but I kill things. So this was a good alternative for me. So yeah, I would love to know what you guys think. If you guys give it a try, give me a thumbs up. If you're new here, I would love for you to subscribe and join our crafting journey. We do a bunch of stuff on this page. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I'm going to take you guys in for a closer look, and I'll see you next time.